Good luck getting a PS5. I'm sure you've heard at this point that for the past week or so, there was a ship called the Every Given blocking the Suez Canal. And I'm not an expert on this or anything, so don't yell at me in the comments if I get a little thing wrong, but the reason that's such a big deal is because the Suez Canal is apparently one of the major shipping routes between Asia and Europe. As we all know, the PS5, alongside pretty much every other electronic device out there, is constructed in Asia. So while this giant ship may not have had any PS5s or PS5 parts on it, it was blocking the canal and blocking up something like $9.6 billion worth of goods per day, which means that all of the other ships that weren't able to travel through this canal that had PS5s and PS5 parts on them were just sitting there. And that means that the console, which has been notoriously hard to get, is just going to get even harder to find because the consoles aren't getting here. They were stuck in this giant canal for a while, like at least a week. In a normal year where the PS5 would still definitely be hard to find, this would have caused a small impact that we would have definitely noticed, but because the PS5 is dealing with a chip shortage that's been happening around the globe due to COVID, it's just become so much more impossible to find this console. And it's not just Sony who's affected by this either. Apple had to delay their iPhone by a couple months last year because there was such a big chip shortage, and that is not going to end anytime soon. And for a lot of people who have been trying really hard to get a PS5 on Amazon or Target or Walmart or pretty much anywhere where they were being sold for MSRP, this is like the final straw. They're throwing their hands up in the air and they're saying, look, I'm just gonna go to a scalper and pay 800 bucks for my PS5. Hopefully it comes with a game. And I'm not gonna fault anyone for doing that, really. There's no way to get these consoles. Scalpers have some bots that help them get the console. Sony already got their money. It's not illegal or anything like that. So if you're one of the people who has $800 to go spend on a PS5, it sucks, but you're okay with it, obviously, and I'm not gonna fault you for that. And the reason I understand where people who are just turning to scalpers finally are coming from is that estimates say, while we don't know how many parts were actually on these ships, because you wouldn't want that information out there, I don't think, they're saying that this could back up production on PS5 for actual months, which is just overall a very dire situation for Sony to be in. And if anyone's still looking for a PS5, it becomes that much more dire for them as well. I'm sure it's a double-edged sword for Sony because, yeah, it's good that these consoles are flying off the shelves and people really want them and they can't meet demand. That's how it would work in a normal year, but it's so much worse than it usually would be in a normal year that I'm sure they're just looking at the situation and saying, damn, all of that money we could be making right now if we could actually produce enough PS5s for how many people want them. It's nice that we're making money, but at the end of the day, we're also losing a lot too. It's a weird situation that I'm sure a lot of other console manufacturers like Microsoft and Nintendo are in. I know that the Nintendo Switch was sold out for a big chunk of last year. Nintendo had Animal Crossing out. That was the biggest game last year, and they just couldn't do anything about it because of this chip shortage. It's really affecting video games in a big way. And the more I think about this, if you haven't managed to get a PS5 yet and you're still rocking a PS4 or PS4 Pro, you might want to stick with those consoles for the time being, because I'm sure you've noticed at this point that a lot of the announced games coming down the pipe are also going to be on PS4 as well as PS5. I mean, Sony knows how many PS4s they sold during the pandemic last year. There are millions, hundreds of millions of them potentially out there that people are still using, so that's why they're porting all of these games like God of War Ragnarok and Horizon Forbidden West. I mean, hell, we just saw it with Resident Evil 8 Village. That was announced as a full-on next-gen console game, and then later on they said, yeah, we were able to get it running on PS4 Pro and Xbox One X, so we're gonna release it there because we have such a big, massive player base still on those old consoles, because Sony and Microsoft, they can't get their new console into people's hands. It's a really frustrating situation to be in all around. I mean, hell, if you got a PS4, Sony just made the remake of Ratchet & Clank from a few years ago completely free, regardless of whether or not you have PS Plus or anything like that. You can just go download one of the best first-party exclusives they've ever made. And yeah, you can say, well, on PS5, it has that update to run at 60 frames per second, which I'm not gonna downplay 60 frames per second. I love the fact that the PS5 can run games at that. All I'm saying is that if you don't have a PS5 or a gaming PC, you've never really experienced many games running at 60 frames per second, so I don't feel like you'd notice the difference anyway. And then when these things become more available a couple years down the line and you're able to get a PS5 at MSRP, you'll still have all of these games in your download list, and on top of that, there will be a ton of other native PS5 games like Returnal, Ghost of Tsushima will definitely have a sequel, Spider-Man 2, God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West. Like, there's a ton of stuff that you can go back and play on a PS5 down the line, and they'll be there their Ultimate Editions. They'll have all of their patches, they'll have all of their DLC, they'll be running and looking their absolute best. And if you played these games first on PS4, you'll look at the PS5 version and it'll look that much better. It's not a great time to be buying a next-gen console, even if you are able to go find one. It's a really weird spot we're in right now. And honestly, I'm not trying to dog on Sony here, but it really does play into a bigger issue with the PS5, which is stuff like they're using two different fans in the console. People are criticizing the interface for being different for no reason. There's not a ton of native games coming out. I think the next one we have to look forward to is Returnal, and then after that, there's nothing really that crazy. All of this could have been rectified if Sony just waited a year to release the console. If they just held on to the ones they were making and put it out this fall instead of in fall of 2020, I think things would be a whole lot different. Xbox would still have Halo Infinite coming out in 2021 for sure, but that's one game. Game Pass relies on so many third-party games, so many smaller AA tier games. If Sony had just waited a year, they could have launched with Miles Morales, Outriders, The Show, Returnal. Every game they have slated to come out this year could launch with the PS5 in 2021, and it would just be a much better situation overall because so many more people would be able to get it, and there would actually be games for them to play on their brand new console. Now, I'm sure Sony took the gamble and released the PS5 against the Series X because they saw it as a sort of opportunity to keep the momentum going from the PS4, because there's no question that they dominated the last generation. And I also think they're looking forward to the future and seeing that Microsoft, all of these different studios they picked up over the past few years, are going to start paying dividends eventually by releasing new games that have AAA budgets. I know that State of Decay 3 is coming down the line. We of course have Halo Infinite, we have Ninja Theory's new game, which is Hellblade 2. Like, Xbox has some serious stuff in the works. They've got a new Fable coming out. So Sony is probably saying we can ride the hype of the PS4, get people to buy as many PS5s as we can make right at the beginning of the generation, and then if Microsoft down the line starts actually competing with us, we'll have a nice head start. I'm looking at my PS5 and definitely not complaining because there are a few games I missed last year, like Ghost of Tsushima, that I'm having a blast with now, but when you look at where Sony's sitting, they knew there was going to be a shortage of these consoles and the parts they need to make them well before they even announced the PS5. They could have easily said, hey, we were planning on releasing it in 2020, but we're gonna hold back and release it in 2021 when the landscape is looking a little bit better. And honestly, that could be a light at the end of the tunnel for all of us who have been stuck inside for over a year. You know, we're gonna be feeling so much better when we can actually go outside without a mask and go do things we used to enjoy, that the idea of buying a console seems so much more fun and exciting than something that's just going to make us happy temporarily while we're stuck inside, which is what happened last year with the PS5. It's also really hard to look at the situation surrounding the PS3, Vita, and PSP stores that are shutting down and just seeing like Sony bungle something they definitely didn't have to. I know that they're probably losing money keeping those stores open at this point, but if they had just kept them open a year longer or waited to release the PS5 until after that situation was rectified, it wouldn't be blowing up in their face nearly as much as it is right now. It's also attached to the PS5 generation because the PS5 is out there. Some people have it, and that's the Sony that people are looking at right now. If they had just waited a year to release the PS5, then people would be attaching the controversy of these stores shutting down to the PS4 generation, and that would be in the past. But now this is a dark stain on the PS5 generation as a whole, and that's going to become a big problem. I don't want to be too doom and gloom because for people like me who did manage to get a PS5, it's actually been a really good time to go back and play old games I missed, like I mentioned Ghost of Tsushima, but also some smaller AA titles like Outriders or Maneater are getting a lot more time in the sun that they wouldn't otherwise have if there were a ton of next-gen exclusives coming out all around them. Like, those are the games people tend to ignore, but having nothing new to play and then seeing the PS5 version of Maneater on PS Plus, that becomes a much more enticing thing to sit down and just kill a night playing. And that game is really fun. I've also been having a ton of fun with Outriders this weekend, so it's not totally a terrible situation that it's being made out to be by so many other people. And I know Xbox is looking like the good guy right now because of all the games that are coming to Game Pass, but they're going to hit a point where they've added pretty much everything they can possibly add to Game Pass, and people are going to want to see new games from them, new AAA experiences. Like, we can't have this new Perfect Dark game getting delayed. We can't have Fable getting delayed. They have to start releasing some exclusives because this isn't just a Series X problem. They had a huge issue on the Xbox One generation where they weren't releasing any exclusives, and it felt like Sony was releasing 3 to 5 a year, and the worst one was good. It wasn't even bad. They haven't released a bad game in so long, and Xbox, it always felt like was a coin flip, 50-50 chance the game was either gonna be buggy as hell, but a lot of fun, or just plain bad. So I feel like Xbox could easily slip back into that mode unless they start releasing some of these big AAA games they've either announced or teased are coming down the line. You know, it's a really weird spot for the game industry right now, but either way, I think we stand to win, which is the cool thing. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for you today on the PlayStation 5. Make sure you let me know what you think about all of this down in the comments below. And remember, if you want to stay PS ready, make sure you're subscribed with your notification bell set to all. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne, and I just hit my shelf. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.